I'm here to introduce Simon Van Booy, this fella here. Simon Van Booy is the award-winning and best-selling author of 3 novels, 4 short story collections and 2 children's books. He has also edited 3 volumes of philosophy and has published essays in places like the New York Times, the New York Post, the Guardian, the Financial Times and the Telegraph. His work has been widely acclaimed and translated into 18 languages. Simon was born in London, grew up in Wales and now lives in Brooklyn. He teaches part-time at the School of Visual Arts in Manhattan, and in 2013 he founded Writers for Children, a project that helps young people build confidence in their literary abilities. His short story collections include The Secret Lives of People in Love, published in 2007, Love Begins in Winter, which was published in 2009 and won that year's Frank O'Connor International Short Story Award, and Tales of Accidental Genius, which was published in 2015. His eagerly anticipated new collection, The Sadness of Beautiful Things, will be published next month by Penguin. Anyone who has read Simon's work will know that his books need to be read slowly and savoured for the sheer and at times startling poetic beauty of his prose, but also because they carry within them such condensed emotion and such a deep sense of humanity. Anyone who hasn't read him really is in for the rarest of treats. Please welcome Simon Van Booy.
Thank you all for coming. That was a lovely introduction. You could keep going, actually. I could. So Billy and I have known each other for almost a decade, and I've been reading Billy's books in New York, so it's nice to get some time with him in person. His last book was a ghost story called The Dead House.
Forget about me.
Oh, yeah, but it genuinely, I mean, I live in, a city where all kinds of things happen on a daily basis, but this book did actually terrify me because I think it's for sale out there. It's really a good book. It's not many people who can write something frightening, but also write about fear beautifully. So anyway, tonight, I'm going to read from the book, the short story collection, Tales of Accidental Genius, which the title really implies that we can all be geniuses accidentally if we put other people before our own needs. So it's not really about the type of genius which people think of as people like Einstein or the chap who invented the vaccinations in the 1700s. I've forgotten his name, but Jenner, I think it is. But about people who accidentally meet strangers who are going through some kind of crisis and just end up sort of shepherding them through it. So I also thought that if the book gets any bad reviews, people will just read it quickly and think the title is sort of talking about the book. So anyway, the story I'm going to read, I'm going to read part of the story while I've got you cornered. And it's called The Goldfish, and I had a couple of goldfish for about 5 years, called Tinks and Tinkerbell, and this story is actually dedicated to Tinkerbell, 2009 to 2013. She had quite a good life. The apartment was probably too hot, which is my wife's fault, because she's always cold. But I'd never say that to her, of course, because she wouldn't want to live with the idea that she might have somehow played a part in Tinkerbell's death. And also, some of the toys that we put in might not have been DPA free. One day we were driving quite innocently on the expressway. The housekeeper called and said, "Your fish dead." And my wife screamed and dropped the phone, and I knew it was serious. And my wife said, "Barbara, you sure?" And Barbara said, "Yes, God's floating." So we knew it was probably the end. We kept the tank for a while, but it was too depressing to get home and not see them. Because they get to know you after a while, and people say they just want food, but I think there's more going on. So I've been friends with this woman for a long time, who's now dead. She died in February, but she was at a stage in her life where she wanted to die, and she was in a lot of pain. And I don't know if you've had that experience where you know somebody who actually wants to die, and you sort of secretly know it's the right thing. It's emotionally difficult to sort of wade through that. I was having lunch with her, and I told her about Tinks and Tinkerbell, and she said, "Why are you having lunch with me?" She said, "I want you to go home and write a story about a goldfish." So I did, and this is it. After lining up with a busload of school children, the old man bought a ticket and entered the aquarium through a pair of tinted glass doors. For the first hour, he drifted from room to room as if he were a fish himself, marvelling at the different colours and shapes, and how some came right up to the glass. Then a woman in overalls and white rubber boots emerged from a door marked "Staff Only." She was holding a bucket, and there was tinsel tied around the handle because it was almost Christmas. The old man saw his chance. "Excuse me, but is there someone I can talk to about fish?" The woman stopped walking. "You can talk to me if you want." "Oh, good," said the old man, "because I desperately need some help with Piper, my goldfish." "I'm afraid we're not allowed to give advice to people who keep fish as pets." "Oh, but it's only that Piper—" "Sorry," the woman said, "I could lose my job." A few days later, the old man was scraping unsalted butter across a slice of toast when he overheard something on television about a new program called Animal Hospital. Eureka, he thought, and went off in search of the yellow pages. Next morning, he found himself sitting patiently in a crowded waiting room, flicking through a tattered magazine about hamsters. When the old man signed in upon arrival, writing "goldfish" on the form, the receptionist said she'd talked to the doctor, but it was unlikely they'd be able to help. After waiting almost an hour, a young man burst through the double doors, his unfastened lab coat billowing like a cape. The cats hissed. The vet chatted with the receptionist for a few minutes, then looked into the sea of faces and signalled for the old man to come forth. The bus ride home was miserable. The old man had felt certain that a trained animal doctor would have been able to help with Piper's condition. But then as the bus neared his stop and people alighted, the old man was struck dumb by the enlarged words of an advertisement on the back of a free newspaper. "Your best friend is waiting to meet you at Gerald's Pet Paradise." Below the slogan were cartoon pictures of dogs, cats, ferrets, and a smiling goldfish with bright teeth and eyelashes. The old man strained to see, but without his glasses it was difficult to read. People were pushing past, trying to get off before the doors closed. When the driver told the old man he was blocking the exit, the woman lowered and folded her newspaper in one motion and held it out. "Take it," she said, "they're free." The old man sat grinning in the bus shelter as he read the page over and over again. Soon, the failure of his afternoon had quite dissolved. The shop was only a few streets away, and with Piper at home in extremis, the old man forced himself to stand and start walking briskly in the direction of Gerald's Pet Paradise. When the last customer of the night burst in, Akin Okunadi, the young assistant, was playing a game on his phone, waiting for the owner to get back and close up. The old man looked around at all the colourful things for sale, and after regaining his composure, shuffled toward the counter, past a stack of empty cages hung with miniature Christmas stockings. When Akin saw the customer approach, he slipped the device into his pocket and asked if he could help. "I'd like to talk with somebody who knows about goldfish," the old man said. "Well, if it's food or filters, I can help." The old man looked Akin up and down. "I'm afraid it's more serious than that." "You'd best wait for the manager then. He should be back in a minute. He deals with what's in the tanks." No. I'm not here to buy a goldfish," insisted the old man, "but to get some advice on one." "Well, you better wait, because my only experience is when my brother got one at the fair." "Oh, it's nice they still do that," the old man said buoyantly. "What did your brother name him?" "We never got a chance. It died in the bag on the way home." The old man looked at his shoes and said how very sorry he was. "He only had it an hour," Akin laughed. "An hour, a week, a decade," said the old man. "A fish is a fish." Along the street, lights were going out one by one as shopkeepers closed up and went home for the night. "I ain't seen you come in before, mister." "That's because I get Piper's food and filters by mail order. I haven't needed a pet shop, until now that is. I don't know why it didn't occur to me before." Then he asked if Akin had heard anything about the snowstorm they were supposed to be having. The young assistant wondered if it would affect the bus service. A few minutes later, the shop door swung open wildly. "It's bloody raining!" Gerald shouted, not realising they had a customer. "They always get it wrong, don't they?" When he appeared from behind a rack of fake mice and rubber bones, he saw the old man standing at the counter. "You must be the manager." "That's right, but I'm afraid we're closing in a few minutes." "He's been waiting for you," Akin said. "Wants to ask your advice about his goldfish." Gerald shot Akin a look of annoyance, then turned to the old man. "What is it then? Food? Gravel? Tank toys?" For a few moments the old man didn't move. Then with a great show of emotion, heaved the words from his throat. "My goldfish, Piper, has stopped moving." Gerald nodded. "I see. He was first on his side, but now he's completely upside down." "Was he dead?" Gerald asked. The old man thought for a moment. "He's certainly very ill. Gravely, perhaps, but dead." "Or is he moving?" "When I put my hand in the tank, he moves. He bobs when I put my hand in and go like this." Gerald and Akin watched as the old man moved his hand in the air. It was soon past closing, and Akin would miss the 5:41 bus. He lived with his mother and brother Sam, who was 10 years younger. Their house was half an hour across the city by bus. It had a small garden in the front that the wind filled with leaves and fast food wrappers. The back garden, an uneven slab of concrete when they moved in, now had potted plants and a freestanding pond, where Akin and Sam sometimes arranged plastic soldiers. If it wasn't raining, Akin rolled his old BMX to the shop. Their mother left early for work during the week, and so Akin made his brother's school lunches and saw him off. Their father had died while Akin's mother was in the hospital giving birth to Sam. Sometimes Akin slipped notes into his brother's lunchbox, lines from hip-hop tracks that were rude or funny. Sometimes his brother crept into his bed at night, then lay there in the darkness, his eyes completely open, thinking of questions and then forgetting them. On the last Saturday of every month, Akin would take his brother into the city centre to choose a new Xbox game. Their mother gave them money to have lunch and see a film. They pooled any change for comics or a box of donuts, which they gobbled on the bus home. Gerald explained to the old man that if his fish wasn't dead, it was probably constipated, and asked how often he cleaned the tank. "Every Sunday," the old man said, "like clockwork." "In that case," Gerald instructed, "try feeding him frozen peas for a week." The man fumbled in his coat pocket for a pencil and something to write on. How many peas exactly?" "2, Gerald said. "Take the skins off. Be sure to do that, then drop the bits in." The old man jotted it down, bits, drop, then slipped the frayed envelope back into his coat pocket. "Oh, that's a great help. How much do I owe you?" "Oh, just £5. The old man removed a large zipped wallet and from a mass of yellowing receipts located a £5 note. "2p a day, doctor's orders," said the old man, handing over the money. "If it doesn't work, I've got freeze-dried fish laxative, but pea fragments are better if you can get them to eat it." "Oh, I'll get him to eat it," the old man said firmly. "Before all this happened, he used to come right up to the glass whenever he saw me, just like those fish at the aquarium." Before leaving, the old man lingered in the shop doorway. Akin wondered if he wasn't going to say something about the unfair charge levied for advice. "I know you want to close," the old man said, "but I have to ask, could it be anything worse than a digestive complaint?" Gerald was straightening up a display of rubber Christmas trees. Oh, absolutely. Floating upside down could also be a bacterial infection or a swim bladder disorder, in which case it's only a matter of time. The old man didn't speak or move. You have to face facts, Gerald said. Some fish just aren't going to make it. It was 20 minutes before the next bus, so Akin decided to pick up a snack from the supermarket for his ride home. Browsing a selection of recently reduced items, he noticed a grey figure bending over a freezer. Hello, Akin said. The old man looked up. Oh, you're the lad from the pet shop. Buying peas for Piper. That's right, said the old man, but there's too much of a selection. I don't know which kind to get. Get the organic ones. Are they better? That's what my mum says. Akin and the old man left the shop together and found themselves walking in the same direction. It was raining, and neither had an umbrella. When it began to pour, the old man asked Akin if he would like to come in and meet Piper. His small pensioner's flat was only one street away, and there was an umbrella he'd be willing to lend the young assistant. On the way there, Akin asked how long Piper had been upside down. Oh, about 3 weeks, the old man said. He just hasn't been himself. As they approached the concrete tower where the man lived, Akin suddenly stopped. Oh no, he said, feeling his pockets. I've forgotten the bus pass. He knelt down and rummaged through his backpack for some time. But we're here, the old man said, pointing to a sign that read Godwin Court. This is where I live. Yeah, I know, but if I've left my bus pass in the shop, I've got to get it before Gerald closes up. Well, if you must go, I'm number 3. I'll leave the door unlocked. You will come, won't you? The rain turned to snow on Akin's journey back to the old man's apartment. Cars crawled along with their headlights burning. There was a particular odour to number 3 Godwin Court that Akin would forever associate with old age. Piles of newspapers rose up like small islands from a sea of dirty carpet. Clothes had been dumped in one corner, and in another, empty cereal boxes, egg cartons, and plastic ice cream containers with mould furring over the remains. The sink had not been touched for some time, and the standing water was coated by a dark skin. On the stove, unwashed pots and pans were piled up, most stained with corrosion or decaying food. A Victorian cabinet, tucked into a corner of the sitting room, was crowded with ceramic statues that looked out with delicate, painted eyes. The fish tank was on a table next to a maroon armchair, and the old man was bending over it, fumbling with scissors in the bag of peas. They'd defrosted on the walk home, he said, so I thought I might get the ball rolling. Piper's in here if you want to come and meet him. Akin stepped over to the tank and lifted the lid. Please be extra careful. As I told you, he's not well. A large goldfish on the surface of the water was in the early stages of decomposition. Akin reached in and nudged the body with his finger. He never used to be so white, the old man said, but I suspect that's just old age. When Akin swallowed the water, the goldfish bobbed in the sudden current. See how he moves when you put your hand in, said the old man. Akin cupped the fish in his hand and looked closely at its gills. Hello, he whispered. Can you hear me, Piper? After releasing the motionless body, Akin lowered the lid and washed his hands. The old man was squeezing peas from their shells and lining them up on the counter. 2 a day, I think your boss said. Shall we? Before you do that, we need to test the dopamine levels of the water. The old man stopped what he was doing. Dopamine levels? What are they? Oh, they're an indication of how clean everything is. Was it important? Very. High dopamine levels will lessen the healing quality of each pea. The old man just stood there. I'm sorry now that I ever doubted your expertise. It's a test I recommend conducting at this stage, Akin went on, but without my instruments, I'm going to need a piece of silver. The old man thought for a moment, probably in the bedroom. When he was out of sight, Akin took the tank lid completely off, then rummaged through his backpack for the container marked live fish that he had picked up on returning to the shop. When he heard the old man coming back, Akin shouted that it was gold and not silver he needed. The old man grunted and turned around. Akin poured the contents of the plastic container into the tank and quietly put the lid back on. "Will bronze work?" came a voice from the bedroom. Akin replied that bronze was even better, and the old man returned with the miniature statue of an elephant. Akin told the old man to get more peas ready, then raise the tank lid and dip the elephant's trunk in, just below the surface of the water. The old man watched. "Wow," Akin said, "these readings are hard to believe." Then he turned to the old man. "The water's so clean, the dopamine level isn't even registering." "Scrubbed clean every Sunday to songs of praise," the old man assured him. Akin tried to imagine how his mother might break it to the old man if he were a child, like his younger brother Sam. "But before we go back to the peas," Akin said, "there's bad news and there's good news." The old man's lower lip began to shake, and Akin could see how he might have looked as a boy. "Which would you like first?" Akin said. "Good news or bad news?" The old man glanced at the cabinet of ceramic figures, then at the photographs on his mantelpiece, at faces once capable of moving, making sounds. They were people who had known him the way he remembered himself. The woman in the largest picture had been his wife. Sometimes it felt like she was just out shopping, or on the other side of a door, about to come in. "The good," he said finally, "because I'm an optimist at heart." Akin took a deep breath. "Well, the truth is, it wasn't constipation what did Piper in, nor his bladder." "Not his bladder?" "Piper was pregnant." For a few minutes, the old man's expression didn't change, as though words ceased to have any meaning. "With twins," Akin said, pointing to two tiny new fish darting excitedly about the tank. The old man moved his head as close to the glass as possible. "Congratulations," Akin told him. "You're a grandfather." And the old man couldn't believe it. "All these years I thought Piper was a young chap." The tiny fish were unstoppable, flapping their bodies through the legs of a deep-sea diver. "And they've been in here all this time?" Akin nodded. "Tells you how bad my eyes are." When Akin explained that Piper had most likely died in childbirth some time ago, the old man had to sit down. Akin found some instant cocoa in the cupboard, then filled a kettle and bashed the cocoa with a spoon until it finally broke. The old man went into detail about Piper as a young fish. Then he got up and stood over the tank, where his grandfish was scooting through Piper's old castle and fake plants. "They're the spitting image of him," the old man said. "And fish live longer when they have company." But when the reality of Piper's loss began to sink in, Akin put his hand on the old man's shoulder. "Loads of fish die in childbirth. It's a lot of stress for them to push the fish babies out." "Well, what I don't understand," said the old man, turning to Akin, "is how Piper got in the family way to begin with." "Well," Akin said, trying to think of something, "I suppose it's like Mary and the baby Jesus." "The Bible story?" "Yeah, but underwater." The old man thought about it. "My wife Doris and I never had any children ourselves. I got Piper after she died, just to have a little friend in the house." "Well, now you've got two little friends." The old man wanted to lift Piper's body out by himself, but couldn't steady his hands. So Akin took the spoon from him. It wasn't the first time something like this had happened. When Akin was 9 years old, he came home from school and found his father in the upstairs bathroom on the floor with a plastic bag over his head. Akin tried to get the bag off, but there was too much tape, and his fingers kept slipping. Sometimes he dreamed that it was happening again, and sometimes the bag came off and he saw his father's eyes. The old man watched as Akin scooped up Piper's body in the spoon. "Dear God," Akin said, "please accept Piper into your flock in heaven." Akin offered to take Piper's body to the park, but the old man said he'd bury her in the morning under one of his plants. Akin put the kettle on again and watched the old man sprinkle a few meal flakes for the two young fish, who were zooming around in the water, completely unaware of the tragedy from which their lives had sprung forth. While they were on the couch holding mugs, the old man said he was going to call one of Piper's children Akin, if Akin didn't mind. "Call the other one Doris," Akin said. It took a long time to get home. The bus was crowded with people talking about the snow, and there were several text messages from his mother asking where he was. As Akin neared the front door of his house, he noticed light falling from the living room window onto a patch of shallow snow. He stepped over and put his face to the glass. His mother and brother were on the sofa and didn't see him. The television was on, and the night echoed with the faint ring of applause. His brother's feet were on a cushion, and his mother was rubbing them with an expression Akin recognised as worry. There were empty chalk ice wrappers on the arm of the sofa, and a loose stack of Chinese takeaway containers on the carpet. In the far corner of the living room was a Christmas tree. It was tall and well lit. They bought it from an all-night convenience store that kept them outside between bundles of firewood and boxes of vegetables. Sam had insisted on carrying one end of the tree and had to keep stopping to rest. When they got home, their mother kicked off her slippers to climb the attic ladder to get the Christmas things down. Akin waited on the second step for her to lower the boxes. They spent the afternoon decorating the tree with ornaments that caught the light. As they were putting the star on, Sam asked if Santa Claus were real. "Of course he is," their mother exclaimed. "Haven't you made your list yet?" After she had vacuumed up the needles, they held hands and cheered when the lights came on. Sam lay on his back and looked up into the branches. On the mantelpiece were photographs from their summer holiday in Cornwall. One night, they couldn't find a bed and breakfast and had to sleep in the car. Sam said if anyone came, he'd protect them, though Akin knew it would be up to him as the older brother, and stayed awake as long as he could, waiting for figures beyond the glass to bear down upon them. But all he saw was the faint glow of stars from deep in the universe, proof that other worlds are as imaginary as this one. Thank you.
Simon had chowder for dinner today. You really did. You know, if you replace the big goldfish with a slice of carrot, you have no problems. Okay, so I did out a load of questions which we probably won't get through. But let's start with you're back in Cork. Can everyone hear me? Is this okay?
Yeah,
okay?
Yeah,
okay.
Points up towards her. Yeah, so, yeah, that'd be better.
Yeah, okay. That's welcome. Okay. Better?
Yeah.
Okay. You're back in Cork, scene of your great triumph for Love Begins in Winter, which won the Frank O'Connor Award in 2009. What did that mean to you, to winning that? What did it mean to your writing and to your career?
It was a huge boost to my career, and I'm still surprised that I won it. But it also was an enormous encouragement because when you sit down, if you write, you'll know that feeling of sitting down, not knowing what to put on the page, and then when you finally do put something on the page, you think it feels mediocre, and so you go through this ordeal of failure, just stringing things that don't work together until finally you get somewhere, and then you start building on that. But knowing that somebody thought that my work was worth reading or giving a prize for was something that meant a lot to me, and also to my daughter. I think meant a lot to her because she'd just seen me sweating in my bedroom, and then eating ice cream and sort of with my head in my hands. So at least she knew it was all for something in the end.
Yeah, the money you mean.
Well, I did take her out shopping a few weeks later, and she was in J. Crew. I don't know if you have that shop here, but I think it's incredibly overpriced. Anyway, she went into a fitting room, and she kept asking the attendant for more things, and she was about 6 or 7 at this point. And then she came out holding these dresses, and I said, "Wow, that's a lot of dresses." And she said, "Didn't you win some award or something?"
That was 2009, that was your second collection. Since then you've written 3 novels. You've written essays. You've written play. You've written a play. You've written screenplay. You've written lots of different things. Your new collection. You're back to the short story again.
Yeah, back home.
Your fourth collection.
Back in my cottage.
So it would seem that the short story has a particular appeal for you. What is it about the short story that keeps pulling you back?
For me, it's the least painful of all endeavours, because you can actually finish it within, a certain period of time. And also, if you change one thing, as you know, when you change one thing in a story, everything then suddenly shifts, and you have to keep reading it over and over again so you can pick up where the cracks are, And in a novel, if you change something, what a nightmare. You just have to keep reading through and then, and that's before it gets edited by a professional. So I feel like with a short story, it's like going away for the weekend and coming back with something.
What do you think the short story allows you to do that a novel doesn't?
Oh, that's a very good question. I think it allows you to establish a feeling in the audience or in the reader simply by using tone in a particular way. Whereas in a novel, I feel like there has to be character development. So in a short story, you can get away with not doing a lot of things, and still making it sort of compelling for the reader.
Yeah. I'm always interested in how writers actually write. It seems to be different for everyone.
Yeah.
Is the writing of every story for you its own story, or do you have a particular way of approaching, a story? What is it that gets you to sit down and start working on a story? What's the prompt for you?
Usually an emotional connection to some aspect of it. Such as it wasn't really a story about a goldfish, it was a story about my friend Barbara's loneliness since her partner died 12 years before our lunch, and her slow decline into dementia. And so that's what I like about stories, is that they're duplicitous. And the good ones, not mine, but other writers, they're entertaining in one sense, but there's also something pulsing beneath the surface. And I think that for me it's much more instinctual and conceptual. Like, I don't sit down and think, this is what I want to happen. Usually I sit down with an emotional connection and then I just let things develop. Actually, imposing too much of myself is usually a bad thing.
How much of you is in the stories?
Or
your novels?
Everything and nothing, really.
Okay.
I suppose... but as writers, you know what it's like. If you don't write for a certain period, you start crying in toilet paper commercials on television, and then you think, I better get back to it. So it's sort of, I'll probably have a pill to cure us of having to write in the future. Because I think, it is a sort of, I don't know.
At this stage, you've written a lot of books. You've edited books of philosophy. You've produced about a dozen books at this point. You've written lots of short stories, lots of essays. How in control of the work do you feel when you sit down, or is there still a trial and error aspect to it? Do you still feel this one mightn't work until you make it work?
Yeah, it's all trial and error still. Yeah, absolutely. It's like driving in fog. You don't want to crash. You wonder where you're going to end up and what's going to happen, but you're right there in the moment, not knowing where you're going to go, and that's sort of what it feels like, really. I think that's why a lot of people, the editing, as you know, is laborious, but I think the not knowing, doing something, engaging in something where you just have no idea if it's going to work or not, I think a lot of people feel that's a fool's mission. So people who do sit down and commit to write have my deep respect. Because, it takes such, almost a sort of madness,
Yeah. When I write a story, I like to know. I won't start the story until I know what the story is about. Are you ever surprised by the story? Does it take its own direction? Does that ever happen to you, or are you more in control of it when you finally do get to write it?
If it doesn't take it on a life of its own, then I know it's probably doomed. But Billy's mother told me a story about 9 years ago, I tried writing that as a story, and then as a novel, and then as a screenplay, and I just didn't have the skills, and so eventually I managed to put it into a short story form, which I thought worked okay. I could see that you see the flaws in your own work. You just hope other people can't, but of course they can. And so I sent it to a magazine in New York that publishes short stories, and the editor said, well, the language is good, but it needs, the characters don't feel like they've been developed enough. So I guess it didn't work, but for me, it was the language side of it gave me satisfaction.
One thing that I'm always interested about when I speak to writers, it's something that you don't really hear a lot discussed, is rejection.
Oh God!
It's like nobody admits to it almost. For years, I aimed for 100 rejections a year when I would send my stories out. Because I felt if I got 100 rejections, I was after doing my work.
The post office is grinning.
Well, email made it a lot easier, but like for you don't look like a fella that had ever suffered a rejection.
Well, it's funny, but I've got hundreds of rejection letters, and I kept them all. And what's interesting is now I get letters from agents asking if I ever need representation. So I go into my file and I pull out the letter from them, and it said that they couldn't. Yeah, they said that they couldn't take on this book because of blah blah blah. But so I think you remember that people in the business obviously mean well and they're very good at what they do. But agents are not artists. They're excellent at business, we hope, good at contracts, and some help actually manage your career. But I think that as writers we have to decide what's good, and I think there's an audience for everything really that's well written. Even like Gothic, like Goldfish, who can turn into teenagers.
If you say so.
Well, one of my editors years ago got this script in the mail, and it was Jane Austen, but there were zombies in it, and she said, "This is the most stupid idea I've ever heard," and she rejected it. A year later, it's like the biggest thing ever to hit publishing.
I do think I think it would be good if there was a bit more talk about the rejection side of it, because for people that are starting to send their stuff out, they really need to know that this is the norm.
It's the norm,
that it really
absolutely.
Is.
I sent out probably 10 pitches in the last 2 weeks to different newspapers, magazines, maybe review books or write articles, and I think usually the norm is not to get answered at all, and then I got 2 kind rejections. So rejection is just, but I was once reading a book about Samuel Beckett, and Waiting for Godot premiered in Florida, I think at the Coconut Grove, and I think it closed after 1 or 2 production. It closed after 1 or 2 nights, and people would leave at the intermission, and the director called Beckett, just so apologetic, and Beckett said, "Oh, I don't care." He said, my entire career has come about as a result of rejection. I wouldn't be the writer I am now if I hadn't been rejected. So I'm only upset if you are. It doesn't bother me at all. It's exactly how my life has been, and I'm happy with it. And when he got awarded the Nobel Prize, his partner Suzanne was on the phone with the Nobel Commission. She said, "Oh, he's not going to be happy about this." I don't know how I'm going to tell him. Give me a few days.
Just send me the check instead. You published 2 short story collections before you tackled the novel. Did the novel at that stage, did it feel inevitable? Had you gotten to that point where the novel was bursting to come out, or was it that everybody was telling you had to write a novel, and also how did you find the transition? How did you deal with it or cope with it?
It was just a lot of uncertainty and a lot of fear, and not so much fear that I'm going to not be able to write the novel, but fear that it's going to be, just mediocre, or I'm not going to feel satisfied with it. And it may be that it's not a very good book, but I learned a lot writing it, and I think I also untied a lot of emotional knots in myself by writing it.
And how easy was it to pick yourself up after writing and start another one? The problem that I always found with, when even the idea of thinking about writing a novel, you write a short story and it might take you a month, and you send it out and you get to work on another one, and hopefully it'll land somewhere. But you can be writing a novel for 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 years, and at the end of it, nobody might want it, I personally found that a very hard thing to deal with. Was that an issue for you, or did you have a contract for a novel at that stage? Okay.
I did have a contract, but the problem is that I think most novels that are commercially successful give you the experience, or the reader the experience of escaping themselves into another reality. But the sort of book I wanted to write was one where the reader was confronted with themselves in this reality. And so I think that even if I sell one book to my mother, I'd rather write the kind of book that I feel is...
They expect a free copy.
they do. And they use them as coasters when you do give them free copies. So you should sell them copies. So I feel like, as long as you write when I have writing students, I think a lot of them are thinking to themselves, what will people like? Like, what can I write that people will like? But the best advice I ever had was to write the book that you've always wanted to read.
Have you done that?
I'm still trying.
The secret lives of people in love. Love begins in winter. Everything beautiful began after. The illusion of separateness, the sadness of beautiful things. What must a title give you? What do you demand from a title?
Well, I don't know if you've ever had the experience of wanting to change all your titles after the books have come out, but that's how I feel. Because the thing is, I learned about a year ago reading Philip Larkin's poems, and he was a strange librarian. Do you know Philip Larkin? He always insisted on driving this miraculous, giant, muscular car, and he was quite a ladies' man, which I never would have thought. But there's a great book that came out about him, which centres on his photographs, called The Importance of Elsewhere. It's really an excellent volume. Anyway, in all his titles, he gives you information about the poet that you can't find in the poem, and you can't really understand the poem unless you have the title. So it gives a sort of context about the poem. Do you see, while being part of the poem, but while being separate from it. So I realised that probably a title should do that. It should give you some information about the book that you wouldn't get from the book, but does that make any sense? So I'm going to start doing a new kind of titling.
Well, in 2013 I had a short story collection called The Things We Lose, The Things We Leave Behind. And I loved the title, I thought it was great. Every single person that had ever mentioned the book to me since has gotten the title wrong. I've heard every variation on the title except the title, the editor of my next book, he was talking to me before Christmas last year, and he had read that book, which was the reason he got in touch with me, and he said, that's a terrible title. Yeah, and he said, I just call it the Yellow Book because it has a yellowish cover, and you know, so he said, whatever happens going forward, we're going to have to work on your titles. So
What did you say?
he said, pay me enough and you can name them what you like.
What was the title before?
No, that was the title. I'm saying
Yellow Book.
that, no, it was called The Things We Lose, The Things We Live. Yeah, but he only read it last year. That was the book that he had read, and he said that was a terrible title. But I thought it was a great title.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious about.
It is a brilliant title because it's ironic.
Well,
I mean, I read the story.
can you even remember?
Yeah,
I just
do.
told you the title,
I do remember
and I
the
bet
story.
you can't tell me back the title. It's that bad.
The Lost Sweet Things now.
Did you have working titles for these books that were different from the titles
Oh yeah,
that they
all
ended up with?
complete rubbish. Yeah, like,
But were they better?
Yeah, well, I think they were, but they weren't. I mean, one of them was called The Greek Affair, and I liked that, but my editor said, no, anyone who's ever had anyone cheat on them will never buy it. Or they'll think it's a spy story.
Yeah,
Or
Graham
about-
Greene.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly what they said.
Okay, what inspires you?
Oh, that's a very good question. Other writers, artists, musicians, mostly. Life used to more than it does, because as I've gotten older, I've got into a more routine with my family. So, you know, I'm in the midst of family life, so I can't just drive to the Mojave Desert and stay there for a week. You know, so I fall on. It's actually very difficult to stay inspired, I think. So that's one of the great battles, I think, for an artist. So I just stay very close to the people I love or who I'm currently crushing on. Right now I'm reading H.E. Bates. It's sort of underrated,
I love
right?
his stories.
I'm listening to Handel and some old Radiohead. Do you remember them?
Yeah. We were talking yesterday, we were chatting yesterday, and you mentioned how important reading is to you.
Yeah, but it's tough.
Yeah.
Because it's so hard to really love anything. Isn't it? You know, so much you can pick up in the bookshop might be someone else's dream, but when you start reading it and you don't connect with it, you know, you've got to... So I think that's the hardest thing, actually, is finding books that connect with you enough, inspire you to write.
But are there, like when your well is really dry, are there touchstone writers for you that you go back to again and again?
Yeah,
the
there
ones
are.
that just get the thing going.
Well, yeah, I go back to Fugitive Pieces by Anne Michaels. I go to Four Quartets by T.S. Eliot. I go to A Painful Case by James Joyce, that short story. And The Last Page of the Dead from Dubliners. And music too. You know, very tonal, very spare music. And maybe films, like Wings of Desire by Wim Wenders. A Turkish film called Time and Winds by Reha Erdem, which is the best film I've seen in such a long time. I wrote to him on Twitter and told him, and he said, thanks.
Your books have been translated into 18 languages. I didn't even know there was 18 languages.
I might have made that up.
How did that work out? You know, how did you find the translation process? Did you have much dealings with the translators, or some
yeah.
more than others? Or?
Yeah, they did have some questions about things.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like certain products that they don't have, like fluff is a type of marshmallow spread in the US. And I think that...
Fluff?
Yeah, I know. Fluff. I should have brought you some. Next time.
No, you're alright.
It's a sort of white substance.
Is that, I've seen it, it expands, does it? You
Yeah.
spray it and it kind of puffs
It's
out.
quite erotic, actually.
Is it like the stuff that's in a Mikado biscuit, you know, Kimberly Mikado, you know, that fluffy...
Oh, I know, I haven't had one of those in ages.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what that's made of, but it's...
Fluff.
it tastes quite fluffy. So
Yeah.
maybe, yeah, that's kind of about it. Only just to ask you, I was going to say that you're admirably prolific. You know, you've had a lash of books out in the last 10 years. What's next? I mean, you have the Sadness of Beautiful Things is coming out next month.
Yeah.
Available in all good bookshops, I presume.
And bad ones.
And bad ones, hopefully. And all those places. But that's next month, but I'm sure you probably have another book on the way.
I do. I just finished. I've been about 20. When I was 18, I lived in Kentucky for a couple of years. I wanted a very different life than the one I was having, and so I went to a very rural part of the state. And I did things for the first time, lots of different kinds of things, and I really sort of became. I grew up there, and so I became friends with the family, who were very, very, very warm people. A type of warmth that I hadn't really seen, in my environment growing up. I mean, it's funny, someone can love you, but they may not be warm. Does that make any sense? So I was friends with this family, and I've been friends with them for the last 25 years. And over time, they would tell me stories. Once Alfreda, my friend's mother, she told me how. I said, what was it like growing up? And she said, it wasn't bad. We were barefoot most of the time. And she said, my mother would make my dresses from empty feed sacks, cattle feed sacks. So I said, that's interesting. And then she took me and showed me a quilt that her mother had made that they still used on their bed. She said, when my mother was 13, she was sold into marriage to pay off her father's gambling debt. And so I thought, ooh, great. Yeah, good story here. And bless you. And so and then over time, my friend Sam, he rolled his car into a river driving drunk, and had some kind of strange experience. And his father was in the military in Vietnam, and just all there. So I decided to try and write their family history from 1915 to 2015, and it's that book I just finished. It's called Kentucky. But of course, a lot of people in Kentucky Kentucky's not known for having not like Seattle or Washington or Boston, where there's a lot of readers. I mean, book sales in Kentucky are quite scant. So, but hopefully they'll read it.
We hope they'll read it outside of Kentucky.
Yeah, I hope so, and in Kentucky.
Yeah. Okay. That's really as far as I've got with questions. But just to finish up, I just wanted to read out a couple of the. Oh, well, if you want to, yeah. Okay. If anybody has any questions.
So close to the clock.
Yeah, I think, okay. No, I just wanted to read out, all these lovely bits of praise that are at the back of the book. They have things like, this is a truly special writer who does things with abstract language that are so evocative and original, your breath literally catches in your chest. And my favourite one is Simon Van Buy writes like Hemingway with more heart.
These reviews are better than the actual books. That's the
problem. You're never supposed to say. I was saying this now so that people would go and look up your books and buy them, and you don't have to put a dampener on that. Okay? So anyway, that's it. Thanks to Simon Van Buy for.